When we last left off, we were looking at the pixel dimensions here with the resample checkbox unchecked so that these were fixed, and what happened when we changed the document size or the resolution. But we actually want to change the width and the height, since on the recommendation of our lab person, this should be 1440 by 960 if we're just going to get a 4x6 printed. And this brings us to the topic of resampling. In order for me to change the pixel dimensions, I'm going to have to turn the resample image box on. And it's a good idea to check the constrain proportions box. That way, if you change the width by anything, the height will change with you and you won't get any distortion. For example, say I changed this to an 8 by 10, I couldn't actually do that. It would be a 12 by 8 because a 12 by 8 is proportional to a 6 by 4. So it's a good idea to keep that constrained proportions on so you don't wind up with any distorted images. But the recommendation of the lab was that we change the width and height to 1440 by 960. Well, I know that 1440 divided by 6 is 240. So if I change the resolution to 240, watch what happens. I now have a pixel dimension of 1440 by 960. What just happened was we resampled down. In essence, we threw away all that detail because our original pixel dimension was over 4,000 by over 2,000, and now it's just 1440 by 960. But this actually isn't detrimental because of the small file size. We're not going to notice that detail that was thrown out. When I click OK, I still have a high quality image that'll print out perfectly at a 4x6. Because all we did was resample down, we're not seeing any of that detail that was thrown out. Unfortunately, you can get into some trouble if you try to resample up. Let's look at another example here. In this example, I've got an image that's a 6 by 4 at 72 pixels per inch. And the pixel dimension is only 432 by 288. You'll commonly see this size when dealing with images on the web for emailing or web graphics. They represent fine for monitors, since monitors usually display a resolution in 72, or even in some cases nowadays, I think it's around 96. But when I try to resample this upwards, say I want to bring this to a lab and have like a 12 by 8 printed at 300, as they probably said, all right, well, you need a 12 by 8, but it has to be at a 300 DPI. Well, all right, I'll just change this to a 12 by 8. Notice how the height changed because of my constrained proportions. And they said I should have it at a 300 pixels per inch, so I'll add that too. Well, look what happens to the pixel dimensions. Before, our pixel dimension was only something like 430 and by 200 something. Now we have pixels dimensions of over 3,000 by over 2,000. So what actually happened was Photoshop added in all of that detail for us. What it does is sort of take an average of surrounding pixels and then creates pixels based on that information. So when I click OK, we now see that this image is sort of hazy and fuzzy, and that's generally what happens when you resample in an upwards direction. It's also known as resing up, you'll hear it commonly referred to. You get this hazy, smooth image because Photoshop just tries to add what pixels it thinks should replace the detail that we are essentially adding because it wasn't there to begin with. So you can resample an image downwards and you can generally always get away with it because you're never going to notice that detail that's lost. But in the upwards direction, you're just going to get a fuzzy, hazy picture that's not going to print well. And so when it comes to a large file, like from a 12 megapixel camera, digital camera, if you're just going to get a 4x6 printed, you don't really need an image that's 4,000 by 2,000 pixels in dimension, or a 4x6 at 728 pixels per inch. That's just going to be a file size that's just way too big. And if you have several of them, that's probably just going to bog down your lab's hard drives. So in this case, 1440 by 960, which is a 4x6 at 240 pixels per inch, will work just fine. And once you have a better understanding of what's really going on once you resize and or resample an image, be sure to check out our videos on the image processor and Dr. Brown's 1, 2, 3 process, as they go over how to batch process or resize an entire folder of images. Just make your life much easier than going through and resizing or using the image size dialog box for, say, like a folder of 50 different images.